Hi, this is Alan Gassman, and I am very thankful to have Allison Friedman and James Constable here for this webinar on what to do about hurricane damages. And I want to start off by saying all three of us are very concerned and very sorry for all of the damages that have occurred. There have been some tragic deaths. A lot of lessons learned about safety, I think. And now we know that there are going to be a lot of damages, and quite candidly, a lot of litigation with insurance companies over damages. And that is pretty sad, but the way the world appears to work. So we're going to talk to you today using their significant experience in this area as to what to tell your clients when they have hurricane damages, how to verify that there are hurricane damages, because there's a lot of damages you don't know about yet, particularly with roofs, and how to handle filing a claim, and how to handle communications, documentation, etc. Before we get started, James was just telling me that he was on Sanibel Island yesterday. He has seen a lot of this firsthand. Do you want to just give us a little bit of background on what's actually going down there and on there and what we may not have seen in the news?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the news is certainly covering it with pictures and all kinds of tragic stories. I've been down in Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Punta Gorda, and then yesterday actually I had the privilege of going out to Sanibel Island. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that are in great need down there. A lot of these properties ranging from, of course, trailers and small houses on up to the 10, 20, $30 million high rises that are out there on the beach with significant damage spread out all over the place. It's interesting, out at Sanibel Island, you've got, a big combination of flood and wind. The storm surge out there was in excess of 20 feet. And so just widespread damage. But this storm covers, multiple counties. It definitely was not an isolated event. And we've seen a lot of damage up and down the East Coast and through some of Central Florida as well.
Okay. How does it compare to prior storms from what you can tell?
In some respects, I would say it compares to Irma in terms of its size. What we saw with Hurricane Irma was damage that stretched all across from the East Coast to the West Coast. I mean, there was property claims from South Florida on up to North Florida. I don't know that this storm was quite as wide, but it was definitely as strong. These counties happen to be a lot more populated. The Keys, especially the Middle Keys and Lower Keys, were impacted by Hurricane Irma in a strong way. But this storm impacted areas that have a lot more density population, and so I think there's a high likelihood of a lot more claims stemming from this storm than those storms. But where this is unique and not so much like Irma is that there's a lot of flood claims as well. Irma was a big wind event. Certainly there was some flooding down in the Lower Keys, but there is significant flooding that's occurring or has occurred down there in this Southwest Florida region.
Okay, so with Allison's help, we wrote a little article, but I think I'd like to start here with something a little bit technical that I think the layman on this webinar should know about, and even as a lawyer, I don't completely understand. The different kinds of policies and the different kinds of coverages, the windstorm, flooding, what sort of policies should people have in the future that they may not have now? And how does this work? I may have a windstorm, but I may not have flooding, and then I have to argue about whether this came from wind or a flood. How does all that work?
Sure. So you've got a, kind of, and I'll think about it in more of a residential kind of sector. You've got homeowners insurance, and homeowners insurance often includes windstorm coverage, but sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes you've got a homeowner's insurance policy that provides coverage for water losses and fires and other type of events, but there will be a windstorm exclusion. And if that's the case, then you've got to go shop and get a separate windstorm endorsement or policy that only covers windstorm. And both of those policies are going to exclude flood damage. And then that's where the flood policy comes in. And so that's effectively a third policy if the regular homeowner's insurance policy excludes windstorm. I would say the majority of homeowners insurance policies, which is your HO3, include coverage for windstorm unless it's in a super high risk area or there's some other risk factors that made the carrier say we're going to exclude windstorm from this homeowner's insurance policy. And there's when you've got a storm like this, like Hurricane Ian, and you've got damage from flood and you've got damage from wind, you've got both carriers tasked with trying to figure out what was the proximate cause of that damage.
Sorry.
And yesterday was a perfect example of that. I was walking through a 4-story condominium building right there on Sanibel Island. And, of course, it was hit with very strong winds and also a tremendous storm surge. In fact, that storm surge was over 20 feet. So the first floor, the second floor, and part of the third floor had flood damage. But even the 2 adjusters that were out there that were standing in these various units were really scratching their heads trying to identify, okay, well, what part are you going to cover on flood? And then, of course, to the wind adjuster, what are you going to cover? And these are 2 adjusters from 2 different insurance companies that had never met or interacted before. And they're out there in the field walking on broken glass and shrapnel, trying to make these coverage decisions. So there's a lot of subjective analysis that goes into these. And at the end of the day, that subjective evaluation from these guys that are being flown in from all over the country affects coverage and what's actually being paid on these claims in a big way.
And I would say, sorry, along with that, even before this storm, now we're seeing it even more, but I always recommend to people to get flood coverage because it's available to you. And a lot of times, even the storm surge is on a different level, but when you have standing water that seeps into your home, even a couple inches or a couple feet, they do like to say, okay, that was flood, we don't cover that. So for residential policies, I always tell people, look, go get flood. So that way, when that water does come in, you're not worried about not being covered. They have these policies available to you. I know it's an additional cost, but at the end of the day, if you have standing water, the worst thing would have them come in and say, hey, we're not covering all of this on your flooring, but we're covering, the upper areas. So I'm in an evacuation zone D in Tampa, which is very unfortunate, but I have flood coverage on my own home. And it's for that exact reason, because as much as I would love to hope that my home is structurally sound and no water will seep in from the ground or from the walls, I just don't want to take that chance of not having that covered for myself. And so I know that we've had a lot of influx into Florida in the last couple of years from Northerners, including my own parents, and having to explain to them, hey, get flood coverage just so you know if this water seeps in, you're not fighting over who covers what. You've got coverage for both. And then, like James said, let them fight out who's covering what versus, hey, this is covered, this isn't. That puts you already in a very difficult spot, having no coverage for certain things.
And to be clear, just to add to that, flood isn't necessarily just on the coastline where it's a storm surge coming from the ocean either. Flood is rising waters. So I saw flood in an auto body that was, several miles inland. It wasn't coastal flooding, but it was rising waters from the parking lot due to runoff and drainage. And so even though he wasn't in necessarily a coastal flood area, he had flood damage. And this gentleman was fortunate to have a flood insurance. But flood is rising water. It's water that comes from the ground up. And then, of course, windstorm is everything that comes from the top down, the roof, the windows, through the building envelope, et cetera.
Okay, so going back to a lot of us are estate planners on this call. So, I've always said to my clients, do you have homeowners insurance? And they say yes or no. And then I say, well, you should really get it. But now I have to say, and do you have windstorm coverage under that policy? And do you have a flood policy? And the client is going to say, I have no idea what I have. So then I'm going to write to the agency, and then the agency, I will bet you 1 out of 3 times will say, well, they don't really have this, but we could provide it. And they didn't really know they didn't have it. So not necessarily in any order here. Somebody's already sent us a question. Is it better to get all your coverage through an agency so that they will coordinate the flood and make sure you have windstorm? Or how do you go about getting all these coverages?
Yeah, I mean, I think an agent is a good place to start, right? I mean, and the goal is that the agent is acting as a fiduciary and doing due diligence and making sure that there's adequate coverages in place. It's a good backstop, but look, these insurance agencies and insurance agents, vary in skill and volume and capabilities, and so really on an individual basis, you really need to encourage your clients or who you're working with to look at these policies and understand what they have, what's covered. You don't have to get into the weeds on all this, specific exclusions and exceptions, but there's just some key elements here. We need to make sure we've got coverage for windstorm. We need to make sure we've got coverage in the event of flood if we're in an area where we're concerned about the propensity of flood. And then the other thing is contents, especially when your clients are businesses. Unfortunately, the same guy that had the auto body shop that was flooded out, he's got flood coverage, but he's got an exclusion for content. So all of his shop contents are not covered. So you want to make sure that your business personal property, your contents that are in these locations are adequately insured as well.
Well, and I think when you get your policy or they tell you what you're going to have to pay, a lot of times we see that people say, oh my gosh, that's just way more than I want to pay for insurance, which insurance is expensive and it's going up every year. We've seen it. And so a lot of times these agents are trying to please you as their client, which is also their job. So they'll find ways to, get that amount down. And sometimes that means, hey, you don't need a flood policy. That's an extra cost because you're not in an evacuation zone. Or, hey, why don't you lower your contents coverage and that kind of stuff. So there's kind of a give and take there of having to advocate for yourself and make sure you have all the coverage you need, while also, letting them kind of guide you in that way to make sure that you're covered. But also, like I said, they're gonna say, I want less, and so they'll offer things like a higher deductible, or like James said, taking away your the business property coverage. So you just have to be really careful. And a lot of times we find clients don't realize that when they asked for a cheaper policy, that they started losing some of those things, and they started signing and initialing things to try to get that number down. And then when this happens, they're going, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I wasn't covered for that. And then they wish that they could go back and have paid a little bit more to have all that coverage.
Just, do you know what Citizens normally provides? So many people are insured by Citizens.
Citizens will provide windstorm. I do not know that they provide flood. I haven't seen a Citizens flood policy. They don't provide it under the program. It's, that's a totally different program that is, I guess, through, federal entities. So there is like Tower Hills and that and some others, but Citizens is not. So they usually do windstorm, but we have definitely seen just windstorm policies from Citizens, and then ones that exclude windstorm. So I've seen it and I know it exists. So you have to be really careful about them as well. Really have to be careful about any policy, just making sure you're not excluding wind. I don't think they do it on most commercial or, the residential properties. It's more the mobile homes and things like that seem to have that wind exclusion that I've seen, unless James has seen differently, but that's mainly what I've seen.
Homes and commercial buildings are the two most common policies that I see that may have a windstorm exclusion.
Seems to me that if somebody has a rental house and they own it individually, they can get, I guess, a residential policy, but then if they put it into an LLC, it has to be some other name. And I just wonder whether when they do that, they lose their windstorm, or we'll have to ask to see.
Well, yeah, and just a quick point on that. If it's a rental policy, that's going to be a DP or a dwelling policy, and that's important for folks that have rental properties. If you got a regular homeowners insurance policy in HO3, that requires the named insured to reside at the house. And we've seen instances where somebody owns a house, then decides to make it a rental. Got to make sure you change over from a homeowners insurance policy to a dwelling policy, because if the named insured is not occupying the building and there's a loss, the policy is actually void.
Okay. All right. So now I probably beat that horse too far here, but let's now go to what do you do today? And one of the things I want to start with is what happened to Marcia and I. We have a house in St. Pete, and we drove by it right after the hurricane and said, great, no damage. It just blew down the gutter. We'll just get a new gutter. Well, as James knows, somebody went up on that roof, a very reputable contractor went on the roof and said, I got bad news. It's not just the gutter. You guys need a new roof. Well, it didn't leak during the hurricane. Why would I need a new roof? And James, you must hear that story all the time. So what's going on, and what should people do right now if they think they didn't have damage?
Yeah, so and what you did is you proactively had a roofer go out to the house and evaluate the damage to make sure that there wasn't some sort of hidden defects or damage caused by the storm that you weren't aware of or were able to see from the ground. And we see that a lot. What I don't see a lot is somebody being proactive, hiring a roofer to come out and inspect the property, which is no surprise since it's you, Alan. But what happens is, the storm hits and, you think there's no damage, and then time goes on, and then, you get a rainstorm, and now we got a couple of ceiling leaks here, and then another rainstorm and a couple of ceiling leaks here. And it starts to add up, and then, maybe 3 or 6 or 9 months down the line, you go, gosh, we weren't chasing ceiling leaks before, but now we are. We've got damage in these different areas. I wonder what's going on. And by the time you get the roofer out there and he says, yeah, your roof's in bad shape, it needs to be replaced, it's probably from this hurricane, but you're coming to a slow realization that the storm damaged the roof. And what happens is that ends up kind of creating a defense for the insurance company, because all these policies have an obligation to provide prompt notice of the loss. And prompt notice of the loss isn't defined in the policies. It's kind of loosely defined in case law that keeps contradicting each other as the years go on. By statute, we've got 2 years, but you got judges that have tried to limit the scope much less than 2 years. So the point there, I think, the big point there is get your roof inspected. Make sure you've got a good, reputable roofer, or maybe an insurance adjuster that specializes in helping homeowners as opposed to an insurance adjuster that works for insurance companies. But get somebody up there to actually do an inspection and walk the roof. I didn't walk my own roof after the storm. I'm not getting up there. But find somebody that will go up there that knows what they're doing and knows how to look at the roof, and make sure you're dealing with a good, reputable person when you do that. But there are plenty of instances of roofs that we've seen that look just fine after the storm, and upon further inspection and or upon further time, we hear stories all the time of, oh, well, 3 months after the storm it started leaking, and it's kind of continued to do that. And the storm is the obvious cause of damage, but you don't learn that until some time has passed. So I think it's very important to get
when you're looking at the damages like you were with the gutter, you kind of count your blessings, right? Like, oh, gutter, I can handle a gutter. That's not so bad. But the truth is, if the wind was strong enough to knock off your gutter, the wind probably was strong enough to start doing some stuff to your roof tiles or your shingles. So I think a lot of times people only see what they can see, and then they kind of just, are thankful, move on, especially when they're seeing such devastation in other areas. You feel almost kind of bad saying, oh, we have damage to our own home. But the truth is damage. And I think in the article I mentioned a property that it was actually when I worked for insurance companies, but the wind had actually lifted the roof off of the house and put it right back in its place. So from the ground, you could not see anything. I mean, that's why as the insurance company, they were fighting that one. But once you got up into the trusses, you started to see small fissures in the wood and things like that. So if you are noticing a lot of damage around, trees down, you did a lot of debris pickup, just think about what that could be doing to your property itself, and don't, essentially look at it on a cosmetic level with a layperson's eye and think, okay, I'm good, I'm done, I can move on, about my merry way, because then, yeah, you will find yourself maybe possibly seeing water damage later from a leak. And yeah, it just kind of all goes all hand in hand. If that storm was strong enough to take up your gutter, it probably moved around some stuff on your roof, and that's where your roofer saw that. So just keep in mind what you're seeing, and if it starts to raise some red flags and you're thinking, I should probably have someone who knows take a look at this, don't push that down. I think it's worth having someone take a look at it just so you know what's there.
So let's go. I know one way to find a reputable inspector would be just to email you guys and whoever emails you, I'm sure you'll return the email and give a reputable inspector. But should this be a structural engineer? Should it be a licensed roofer? Can it be a licensed contractor? Who's qualified to go get on my roof and tell me what actually happened?
I think the two most common instances we see is it's either a qualified roofer or an insurance public adjuster or contractor.
Okay, and the contractor it could be a general contractor. Okay, now you mentioned this word public adjuster, and I think I'm still learning what a public adjuster is and what they do. It's someone who is not a lawyer, who has registration with the state of Florida and is allowed to negotiate with an insurance company on your behalf.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about why I would want a public adjuster versus filing a claim with my insurance agency first versus when I would need a lawyer who may charge more than a public adjuster, and how that works?
Yeah, I guess public adjusters have a place in time, right? Public adjusters are down all over South Florida right now. A lot of them used to work for insurance companies as adjusters and changed over their license so that they represent policyholders instead of representing the insurance company. Typically, they're working for a percentage of the claim on a contingency fee. Those fees are capped by statute at 10%, which is what we see a lot of the public adjusters doing. There's a lot of great public adjusters in the state. There's a lot of very bad public adjusters in the state. Similarly, there's a lot of great contractors and there's a lot of bad contractors. And I've seen a little bit of that down there just over the last week, some really glaringly, poor work being done, or, yard signs out there advertising all things they shouldn't be advertising for. But I've seen a lot of great public adjusters represent policyholders and do a great job advocating from a legal standpoint or operational standpoint. As a law firm, we like public adjusters because a lot of them will go sign up clients. They'll do their best to negotiate a claim settlement, and when they reach an impasse, then of course they'll bring it to us for litigation. So they obviously benefit a law practice like mine. Ali and I's practice has kind of morphed over the years. We do handle a lot of these litigated cases. We got a case up for trial right now on a first party claim. But what we found is that we've been getting involved earlier and earlier in the process, and that's kind of been a phenomenon after this most recent storm. We handled about 1,000 claims after Hurricane Irma for folks all over the state. And as soon as Ian passed, most of those were files that came from public adjusters or contractors or former clients. What we've seen is we've had a lot of clients reaching out, wanting us to get involved at the very beginning of the claim process. Hey, can you call my insurance company? Can you coordinate these inspections? Can you pick the person that's going to inspect our roof? And so what we've done is we've kind of morphed over the years where we handle claims just like a public adjuster would really at the outset. So we come in, if it's a non-litigated case, we will represent the policyholder for that same 10%, so that we're in that same fee structure. And then if the claim has to be litigated, obviously, there's a different fee structure in place. But that kind of allows us to make sure that things are set up properly from the very beginning. We got the right contractor out there, got the right estimate. Hopefully the folks said the right thing during the recorded statement, et cetera.
That's really good. I mean, I'm the trustee of some trusts. The trusts have houses in them. I think I've got a duty to go ahead and have somebody who you might recommend or who is licensed go look at those houses. And then if I file my claim with the insurance carrier and they don't pay 100%, I probably got a duty to hire somebody like you to make sure that the company pays it properly. And as James knows, Marcia and I have another house where we had a storm come through, and it started leaking a few months later, and the engineer from the insurance company assured me that it had nothing to do with anything that we had coverage for. And unfortunately, James came around, and eventually the insurance company did the right thing. So sometimes, Allison, I'm interested in your take on this. Sometimes the insurance companies do the right thing, and sometimes they don't. And if they don't, they make more money. And if they do the right thing, then they have better reputation. And I would not ask you to name any carriers here, but is there like an inconsistency? Is it when you're at a cocktail party and someone says, well, my house is insured by ABC, are you thinking, well, I wouldn't ever insure my house with ABC, I would use XYZ, or are they all the same?
I definitely think they're not all the same in how they handle the claims. I think a lot of times I um, commend some of them for their business decisions, and others I'm not sure who's making the business decisions sometimes. Right now, the issue that we have, which I think everyone's aware, if you've watched the media lately, is that we are losing a lot of insurance companies quickly. And so the available insurance companies, it's becoming less and less, which makes it a lot harder. So I think your best bet is making sure you have the right coverage, like we talked about earlier, with whatever insurance company that may be, and then making sure if you are in these situations that you find the right people to help you. When James was saying we get involved earlier on, some of these companies are very, which I commend them for, they get all the facts, right? They want to do these investigations, and they do things like take recorded statements. They ask a bunch of questions when they're on your property, and those are all things that insureds who may not know the process or aren't used to it or just trying to get their claim looked at are not sure what to say, or if they're saying something that may be incorrect. For example, a lot of times they'll ask about interior damages, and I think you and I had mentioned in when we were talking about the article, a lot of interior damages are not noticeable standing in your home. They're above your ceiling, or they haven't quite made it to somewhere where that you can see, and they'll ask them, is there interior damages in this room? And that person will automatically say, nope, because they don't see anything, because they're just standing there. And the insurance company automatically checks that as, okay, there is no damage in this room, we are not covering this room. So I think, yes, there are insurance companies that are better than others. I wouldn't name any, of course, because I don't think that that's fair. And I think there's good adjusters at each insurance company too. So sometimes it's just the adjuster you have as well. But I think that's why you have to be very diligent in who you have around you. You're making sure that you can take care of your claim, handle your claim properly. I always tell friends and neighbors, if they say, look, I'd rather go about this myself, I'm like, okay, best, I completely understand that. We're here if you need us. And then usually at some point, if they start to hit a sticking point where they feel like they're getting asked questions they don't understand, or they're not sure that they're providing the right responses or why they're being asked, if they're trying to, figure something out that makes the insured nervous, then I start getting those phone calls of, hey, can we get your help on this? So I definitely think there's good and bad insurance companies, but I think it's, like I said, I think it's sometimes just the adjuster at the insurance company itself, and whether that individual, how they're handling the claim. But it's more up to the insured, just to make sure that you have people to help you. I mean, they're available. We're available. Other attorneys are available. The public adjusters. There's people around who know this industry who can help you make sure that you're understanding what's being asked. Because if you don't understand questions that are being asked and you're providing answers that you think are the right answers, you may sometimes find later on, by just saying that and saying, oh no, that there's nothing in this room, what you've actually done to your claim is you've automatically put yourself at a disadvantage, which I hate to see for people, because sometimes they're just not sure. They don't know what's there. They're not experts themselves. So I think that's the, I guess, better takeaway than which insurance companies to use and not use.
Okay, so Allison, I've got on screen here, if you see it, the pages that you added to the article. Do you want to just go through these points one by one, wear and tear and prompt notice, or have we covered it?
I mean, it was touching on the interior damages. I will definitely say that interior damages from a storm don't always look the way that you think they're going to look. I think people expect what they see, right? The stuff that makes, what James was talking about seeing in Sanibel, what we've seen on the news, that is, windows are blown way off and there's, debris everywhere. Sometimes that's not what it looks like, right? There's a leak that's made its way through the roof into a particular room, and then you start to see that stain. So some people will see a stain in their master bathroom. Let's say that's what starts it. And so then they say, oh, well, there's no damage in my master bedroom. Well, the way that water flows into your home is it takes a path of, least resistance from some sort of entry point, And so there may be damages right above your master bedroom that you just can't see standing right below it. So I think when you are looking around, don't assume that just one spot means there's only damage in that spot. And I think that's kind of an issue that people have. Also, we mentioned cracks in there, loose tape lines, baseboard separation. Sometimes water damages don't look exactly like you think, or wind damages don't look exactly the way you may think they look. So you just have to be really careful about what you see and making sure you point that stuff out to an adjuster if they're there, or even take note of it for yourself for whether you should be filing a claim. Is there anything else on like interior damage, James? I think.
Let me just, I see a point
Yeah.
here. I see a word here that I honestly don't know exactly what it means. What is a 4-point inspection? I know that this is what
Right.
a lot of carriers want you to pass before they'll insure your home. But is that what I'm looking for? Because as long as I'm going to hire someone to go up on my roof and tell me if there's damages, I would also like for them to be qualified to tell me there are no damages so that the next carrier is going to be responsible. And we can
Right.
verify that it was the next storm that did it.
Right, and I was talking about 4 points. So the wear and tear issue comes up a lot. Hey, we don't owe you for your entire roof because, it's 12 years old and a shingle roof only has 15 years. The good news for most people is when you buy a house, like I bought my house 3 years ago, I had someone go up there and prepare a wind mitigation report, a 4-point inspection report so that I could get insurance, right? So that was given to my insurance carrier. That's why they chose to insure my property, because they looked at it and said, okay, this roof still has life on it. We'll insure this property. If they had said, oh, this roof needs a replacement, that company would never insured me. I would have been buying a new roof right from the beginning, or asking the seller to buy a new roof for me to purchase that property. So yes, individuals who can go up there and say this roof has 7 more years left or 10 years left. I'm not sure honestly how they kind of do all the mathematics on how they pick the number of years, but those mitigation reports are something you need in these instances when they're saying, oh, well, we're not going to cover your whole roof because it's old. It's, well, you took on my property, you insured it, knowing it was 12 years old, based mainly on these reports saying that it still had life left. So these are they're a great way to support your claim when they're trying to say, no, wear and tear, your roof's old, we're not going to cover your claim. So but those individuals who are the roofers, the contractors, those are usually the similar people who can provide these reports. I think that's where mine was a home inspector that prepared my reports.
Got it. Okay, very good. So what are the 4 points that a 4-point inspection covers? Does anyone know?
Looking at the roof. They're looking at the roof. They're looking at the HVAC systems. They're looking at the plumbing, and they're looking at electrical, and essentially evaluating each of those systems and determining whether it's a pass or a fail. It's a way for the insurance company to look at those systems, which are the most likely to lead to a loss, and to help in their underwriting evaluation as to whether they're going to write the property or not.
Okay. Is there anything you guys want to cover before we go to questions and answers?
The only thing I would add to this is, I think when a hurricane hits, it's very common for the insurance company to open coverage, or to say that, hey, there was a covered windstorm event, we're going to accept coverage. Naturally, there's a deductible that's written into the policy, and then the insurance company writes an estimate, okay? And those estimates can range from great to good to poor to extremely poor, depending on, the insurance company, the guidance that insurance company is giving their adjusters in terms of what should or shouldn't be going into their scope, and the quality of the adjuster, okay? And so what we saw after Hurricane, all these storm events, Irma was certainly no exception, is these scope disputes. The adjusters, they get on the roof and, they say, okay, we've got 20 shingles missing, or we've got 60 shingles missing, we've got 130 tiles missing. And we get into these disputes of, can the roof be repaired, or does it need to be replaced? And, similarly, we see these disputes on interior damage. You've got a ceiling leak. Does that get painted over, or does the drywall have to be removed to make sure there's no mold on the backside of the drywall? And then if you do that, you've got to retexture it. Those are just small examples of scope disputes. And I think from the insurance company's perspective, looking at things from a conservative view, which some insurance companies tend to do, understandably so, it lends towards having smaller estimates. And right now, construction prices are at an all-time high. It's hard to find materials. It's hard to find those qualified contractors. Even harder than that is finding a qualified contractor that can actually get you on the schedule. So the price of these repairs is going to be significantly more than you see in a lot of these insurance company estimates. So there's a lot of folks out there who probably called their insurance company, had an adjuster come out, or in the process of having an adjuster come out. And all I would, the main takeaway would be, don't necessarily just rely on the estimate that they're getting, because we've seen just countless times where you get an estimate, you get a check, fine, deposit the check, but get a contractor out there, let us take a look at it. Let somebody, take a look and double check the insurance company's estimate, because the letter that they send and the check they send and the correspondence that says we're now closing your claim doesn't have to be the end of the story. If you think that the cost of repairs is going to be more than what the insurance company has paid, let us take a look at it, or let somebody take a look at it and go back to them, because with advocacy, there is always more money to be paid on these claims. And it's not a money grab, it's because it's what you're entitled to. The cost of repairs almost always exceeds what these adjusters' initial estimate and payment is on these claims.
Good to know. Good to know. I also wanted to point out, I was speaking with a construction litigation lawyer, and he said he has seen so many cases against people posing as contractors who did not really have a license. So there's plenty of people that'll go up on your roof and take $5,000 and tell you they fixed it. And then if they didn't pull a permit, you have an illegal roof now, which is, you're not going to have coverage later, or they're not going to do the job, and they don't have liability insurance, and you can't complain against their license because they actually turn out not to have a license. So you have to be careful. There will be fly-by-night roofing companies that will come up, and then they'll pull everything down, and then it'll rain because they didn't do it on a dry day. And so people have to be, the other calls you guys probably get a lot is, what roofer can I trust out of the, because probably you can trust 20% of the roofers that are out there, and 80% of the roofers do, probably are not all that, not fully insured, not fully staffed, because it's hard for them to find materials. It's hard for them to find good people. So you end up with bad materials or not enough materials and put on by people who weren't so good. So let's all be careful there as well. So let me go ahead now and ask some of the questions that I see here. Let me see here. Aren't some people ineligible to get flood insurance because of where their house is, like trying to get earthquake coverages for some places in California near a fault line? Is it always possible to get flood insurance?
I have heard of some limited instances where there was a prior flood loss, and then FEMA came in and said that they wouldn't write a flood policy. But I think the majority of the state is in areas that can get flood coverage. And there's probably a better question for an insurance agent that sells those policies versus us. We're usually reviewing the policies that have already been purchased. But I would say that the vast majority of the state, you're going to be able to get flood coverage.
Okay. Here's a question. Will my umbrella liability policy cover any flood damages? And I'm sure the answer is no. Your umbrella liability policy will cover damages for when someone gets hurt and sues you as a homeowner, but
Right.
Not for.
We've had that happen where people send us their liability policies, and then we've had to tell them this is not property, and they may not have property, or they have very limited. So no, you have to have a separate for that.
Right. Okay. Is it true that insurance in Florida won't cover homes with roofs over 10 years old?
That's not true, although that stems from what was discussed in the news prior to the special session that the legislature held earlier this year. So there was a proposed bill, which was written by the insurance lobbyists, that would significantly limit coverage if a roof was more than 10 years old. That bill did not get passed. There was a version of an insurance reform bill that was passed. And what you'll see is, from the underwriting standpoint, it is becoming more and more difficult to insure those properties, but there is still coverage. There's not an outright exclusion for a roof that's more than 10 years old written into the policy. But what we're seeing is the insurance companies are really tightening up on their underwriting requirements. So as policies are coming up for renewal, we're seeing letters from the underwriter saying, hey, either this roof needs to be replaced or show us evidence of repairs. A lot of folks are being required to maybe get a 4-point inspection or a wind mitigation report to continue with insurance. So the underwriting guidelines are becoming more and more difficult, but there's agents that are finding ways to bind these coverages, but there's nothing in the specific policy that excludes damage to a roof that's older than 10 years.
Okay. What questions do you ask the public adjuster to see if they're going to be good or not? Okay. Do you know James and Allison? Do they?
Yeah. I know. Okay. That's a toughie, because a lot of these public adjusters are really great salesmen. So they probably got the answers to most of them. As with anybody that you're hiring related to your home, you need to know about their background. You need to know about their experience. Are they local or are they not local? How long have they been doing this? Those are questions I'm asking, whether it's a public adjuster, it's a lawyer like ourselves, or a contractor or a roofer. I think those are some of the questions that really drive towards somebody's credibility.
Okay.
And I think asking around too, asking neighbors who they've used or friends. I think, word of mouth is always, that's how we get a lot of our clients, is they're recommending us because from their neighbors or friends or family. And I think that's always a good thing to ask around and say, have you used this person? How did it go? Type of thing, versus going with the easy route, which may be the person you run into. Just make sure you're vetting them really well to make sure that they know what they're doing. People who've used them before.
Right. Okay, here's a great question I've been getting, and you may or may not know the answer. If I don't have insurance, how do I get money from FEMA? And how much can I get from FEMA? That's the federal program.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are certain FEMA programs out there. FEMA's on the side of the road giving out tarps. There's a FEMA program that's been in place for generators for folks that still don't have power. If you don't have coverage, you can't get a tarp on your house. I think you go to FEMA.gov. There are certain FEMA grants available. There's an application process for that I think, again, is on FEMA.gov. And if I'm not mistaken, there's kind of some discretionary decision making that is done by FEMA in terms of what they will and won't do to help.
I think it's maybe $40,000 ceiling on what you can get for the loss of a home or something like that, and then another 40,000, something like that, for loss of private insurance. Let me see. What are the criteria to determine, for a carrier to determine whether to replace or repair a roof?
It's pretty subjective. I would say that one of the baselines is found in the Florida Building Code. The Florida Building Code says that, or has historically said that, if any roof structure has more than 25% of damage, then it has to be replaced. Okay, and so that's to prevent folks, just like any other, if you're going to upgrade your electrical systems or plumbing systems, it's the same thing. You've got it's called the 25% rule. So if the roof is more than 25% or more of damage, it requires replacement of the roof. But if we're talking about a shingle roof or a tile roof, the tiles are stacked on top of each other, just like shingles are on top of each other. So it might not be that 25% of the shingles are damaged, but repairing the hypothetical 10 or 12 or 15% of the shingles that are damaged requires removal of those undamaged shingles. So it's very easy for a small repair to a roof to encompass 25% or more of the roof structure. And if it encompasses 25% or more of the roof surface, then it requires replacement. Then there's the whole other issue of can it be repaired and still be in pre-loss condition? Insurance is about bringing people back to their pre-loss condition. So if I take a shingle roof that's been cooking in the sun for the last 12 years and it's faded and it's discolored, and then you put new shingles on there and it jumps out and it's just super obvious that these shingles were added on after the fact and it doesn't look right, from my perspective, I know from Allison's perspective as well, our position, you're not in your pre-loss condition, because before the storm, you had a roof that cosmetically all matched and went together, and now you've got a roof that looks like it's been patched, in part, and aesthetically, it's not the same, and that is another way to argue for, which we've had a lot of success making those arguments, that the roof needs to be replaced, not repaired.
And same thing with shingle or with tile. There's a matching argument that insurance companies make where you can the tile gets it's funny, they retire them really quickly, so you can't get the same type of tile. I mean, they've gotten wise to this, I think, where they've figured out that if they just say, oh, that tile is not available anymore, then people can't get it. So they'll say, how many are in your garage? And people will say, oh, 6, 10, I don't know. So then that makes it really hard to completely make your roof look like it did before the loss. So tile is even more difficult, where there's this matching issue of finding similar tile that looks like what you have now, that probably doesn't even exist anymore and you can't get it.
Okay, here's another one. A contractor came to me and said that they would accept assignment of my insurance rights. What does that mean? And I saw the nod no. Don't do that. I understand that. What does that mean, and why are they doing that? And should I become a roofer, and should that be what I do?
Yeah. So an assignment of benefits is it's where you're actually assigning your rights under the insurance contract to a third party. Okay, so you cannot assign an insurance contract, but you can assign a claim. So as soon as a claim is submitted, I own that. That's my property now. I have a claim. I can sell my house and I still own my claim. The contractor is saying, hey, hire me, and all you got to do is sign this document, and I'm going to do everything. Well, the problem with that is now he owns the claim. And a contractor that's out there asking for an assignment of benefits, more often than not, is playing the insurance game. His pricing is probably 30 or 40 or 50% more expensive than the next guy. And so when the insurance company says, we're not paying that, your prices are too high, and that roofer says, well, I'm sorry, I can't do it unless you pay me X, he's probably got a lawyer lined up that's going to file a lawsuit seeking what his price is on the invoice, and that leaves the policyholder stranded, because what we've seen just countless times, which is why I'm emphatically shaking my head no, is the homeowners found 10 different roofers that are willing to do it for what the insurance company is willing to pay. But this roofer right here says, I can't do it for any less than X. And his lawyer says, well, we need X plus attorney's fees and costs. And the insurance company don't want to pay it. And you've got this stalemate. Meanwhile, the roof needs to be replaced and the homeowner is left twisting in the wind. And once the assignment's made, it's difficult to be revoked. And so you're giving up all the rights to the claim by signing an assignment of benefits. Now, if it's for emergency services only, or mitigation only, or maybe for a TARP only, that's totally different, and if it's an assignment, which I would still argue it should not be an assignment of benefits, that can be done with a direction to pay, where you're just signing something saying, hey, insurance company, pay this person for the work they perform. An assignment of benefits takes all the control away from the policyholder and puts it with this person who now owns that insurance claim. They're entitled to all the rights under the contract.
And I would say, though, even though you assign your benefits, you still have a duty to participate under the policy. So people think, oh, if I assign this, great, it's off my shoulders. I don't have to do anything. I'm going to sit back, get a new roof, and go about my merry way. Well, under the policy, you still have a duty to provide the insurance company with information. So when these people get called for depositions or EUO examinations under oath, or they're going, well, no, I assigned it, and that's not how it works. You still have to participate in the claim, even though you've assigned the benefits of it to that individual. So it doesn't take, you're not off the hook for everything and suddenly going to find yourself with a new roof. So I think people misunderstand what they mean, and then they find themselves really stuck in a situation they don't want to be in. So like James said, there's certain instances where it makes sense, but it's just something you be really, really, really careful about, and make sure you're reading what you're signing over and what position it's going to put you in going forward.
And I would add to that, if you really like the roofer and you think that roofer's fantastic and you want to use them, ask them for an estimate and submit that estimate to your insurance company and ask for the insurance company to pay based on that estimate. But you shouldn't have to assign your insurance claim for that roof, to that roofer to make that happen. If you want to use a roofer, you can do it, but send their estimate to the insurance company. And if the roofer gives you an estimate, then you kind of go down that road. But a lot of these assignment of benefits roofers wouldn't be interested in giving you an estimate. They want the assignment, they want that claim.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Is there a way to get the attorney's fees from the insurance carrier?
Yeah, so attorney's fees has kind of been a bit of a moving target. Just since the past legislative session, we've always had Florida Statute 627, 428, which creates one-way prevailing party attorney's fees. So it's always been, if Allison and I take a case on behalf of a policyholder, if the insurance company's conduct led them to hire us, and our conduct led to a payment on the claim, the insurance company owes our fees and costs. We don't have to get the full amount of our estimate. We just have to get a judgment in favor of the policyholder. There's now been some changes to the attorney's fees and costs statute that just became effective in in May of this year. There's some now pre-litigation notice requirements and some additional analysis that courts do in terms of determining the amount of our attorney's fees and costs. But there is one-way prevailing party attorney's fees and costs in these property insurance disputes.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, that has answered all the questions. Is there anything else you guys want to make sure we mention on this topic? We've got about 8 minutes left, and once we're done with this, I can talk about some tax things, and probably everybody will leave immediately when I start talking about the tax things. But anything else, Allison or James, that come to mind that we haven't covered?
Allie, is there anything you want to add?
Sorry, the only thing I was going to say is I just think just be careful where you're getting your information from. I think I've seen a lot of things on TV, social media, things like that, where people say, I'm not going to file a claim because I heard it will get denied, or I'm not going to file a claim because I was told they're not being, just all these things. And it's, look, if you have damages and you have a claim, take care of it. You've been paying for insurance for a long time. Don't let, your neighbor down the street or someone you've never met before who posted something encourage you differently. I think you need to talk to people who really know this arena and can help you and provide you the information that you need to make those decisions, whether you should file a claim or not. I just hate that I hear all the time, oh, I don't have flood coverage, so it's not worth it. They said, so-and-so said, and it's just, I don't know who so-and-so is, but make sure you're talking to the right people and getting the right information. That's why it's important to have this webinar. I'm glad we could participate in it to try to get this information out to people, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's really disheartening. And it's I just hate. I mean, my own grandma thought she wasn't supposed to file a claim because of something she saw on TV, and I was like, Grandma, this is what I do. Like, call me, please, let me help you. So it breaks my heart that people think they shouldn't be filing claims, or they shouldn't be getting their damages repaired for whatever reason.
So anyone on this webinar who's a lawyer or CPA or financial advisor, I'll send you a Word version of this letter that Allison wrote most of, and I took credit for half of it. And you can send this to your clients. And then, am I correct, if you're a lawyer and you get involved with this, and then another lawyer is the main lawyer, there can still be a legal referral fee. They call it a referral fee, or a co-counsel fee. So if you're a layman, your regular family lawyer can help you with this, do the best that they can. You can trust them because you know them, as opposed to wondering whether a public adjuster is doing the right thing. And then they can get a lawyer involved if the insurance company's not being fair, and trigger an attorney fee statute, and get you your roof, the roof that you deserve. People, you have to watch out for yourself nowadays. Everybody knows that. Not everybody's going to work in your best interest, especially now. So many people are working from home. It's hard to find good people. People who mean to do well make a lot of mistakes on the paperwork. So you have to try to be very careful. You've got Allison and James's email address at the bottom of every slide here. As I always say, you can email me with the easy answers and email my guests with the hard questions. But thank you very much. And if something develops, if you let us know, we can have a 10-minute webinar on what's developed. And if anybody can think of any content that they would like to have, if you'd like Allison or James to speak for your organization to try to get the word out to help people, there's going to be just a lot of wet roofs and a lot of wet houses in Florida, and a lot of people who didn't make their claims in time, or who got not enough money, or had a roofer do their roof and it turned out it wasn't a licensed roofer. So let's just try to watch out for everybody and get the word out. All right, so on the tax side, and Allison and James, you can feel free to go and probably return one of the 742 phone calls you've gotten this month. But on the tax side, if you live in Florida, whether this storm hurt you or not, you don't have to file your tax return until February 15, as long as you were on extension. So you're going to want to talk to your CPA about this, and I hope you're using a certified public accountant. But you can extend a lot of returns, but not a lot of payments. If you owe money, that's not necessarily extended. But especially what's helped our law firm is we file a lot of estate tax returns, and suddenly we have till February 15th to file a couple of large returns that were due next month. So just be aware of that. I've given you a summary of the rules, but I'm not going to go through them. Because every rule has an exception, and then every exception has another exception. So make sure you talk to your CPA about it. The other thing I want to mention here for 3 minutes is Internal Revenue Code Section 139. And Allison and James, this may be something you want to make sure that your business clients know about. Under Section 139, my company can make a payment for the benefit of an employee as a result who suffered problems as the result of this storm. And I get a tax deduction for making the payment. I do not have to pay payroll taxes. It does not count towards my payroll on the pension contribution. And the employee does not have to include it in income. And I can discriminate. In other words, if Marcia and I have uninsured damages, my practice company can pay for those damages, get a tax deduction because I work for my practice and I deserve it. And then Marcia and I do not have to pay income tax on the money spent. So it includes personal family living and funeral expenses incurred as the result of a qualified disaster. And President Biden has declared all of Florida and South Carolina disaster areas. So, and then number 2, to reimburse and pay reasonable and necessary expenses incurred to repair or rehabilitate my house or my rental house or my vacation home that are caused by the storm. So we can go ahead, and to the extent we know that these are not going to be paid by insurance, we can pay them ourselves. And some people, you know, you don't want to even bother with the insurance because it's a relatively small claim. The one other thing I want to mention for the business and tax advisors is you can put your 2022 disaster expenses or loss of value in as a deduction on your 2021 tax return. So, and I'll give you an example. Your building before the hurricane was worth $500,000. It was in 2 feet of water, and you don't have insurance. The building is now worth $100,000. It's gone down in value $400,000 because no one wants to buy your building. It was soaked with water, and it'll never be the same. You get a $400,000 income tax deduction. You can amend your 2021 return and immediately get a refund from Uncle Sam. So get the word out to clients. People are living in their cars because they have no money and they lost a lot and they don't have insurance, and they can go ahead and amend their tax return for 2021, take the deduction for this under Code Section 165 and get a check for the government. Now, we recorded a 1-hour webinar that covered a lot more of the taxes recently this week with Carl Mills and Ken Crotty. That's available. If you need a link, we can send it, or you'll find it on our YouTube channel. This presentation has been recorded, and it will be retransmitted to everyone who signed up in about 2 to 3 hours. So you'll be able to click on a link and see it. We'll also be sending you our slides. And please, when you get that email, forward it to anyone who may be helped by this program. So Allison and James, thanks again for joining us. Is there anything else you thought of that you would like to say besides the word goodbye so I can return my phone calls?
Just a big thank you. I appreciate you hosting us today and allow us to be part of your webinar.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you to all attendees, and best wishes for everybody hurt by this storm and for everyone who helps those people. Thank you.
Thank you.